for everyone who's on now. Thanks for coming today. So if you're not familiar with Evika, we are an online platform that provides free and accessible education for people living with disabilities and those who care for them. So today's webinar is Raising a Child with Complex Needs, the start of the journey. And we're so lucky and pleased to have Yuffie Scheinberg here, the executive director of Kayla's Children's Center, KCC. And yeah, before we get started, I think, for anyone who's new to these, all of our webinars are sponsored. So today's is part of a series that's sponsored by Control Bionics. So thank you to Control Bionics for allowing us to put on these sorts of events and your thought leadership in helping people with complex needs. We'll talk a little bit more about Control Bionics later on in the webinar. But for now, let's get to Yuffie. So I'm not going to go through this. Why don't you take a minute to introduce yourself as well as KCC, and maybe tell us a little bit about how you got into this work.
Sure. It's a loaded question, though. I'm Yuffie Scheinberg. I'm very lucky to be leading this organization. KCC is Kayla's Children's Center, and we have a school, a therapy clinic, and a respite and recreation program. So really a place where families can come as soon as their child is diagnosed, or if they need any additional therapy, even without a diagnosis. And really, it's a one-stop shop. So they can, if they need the school program, if they need the therapy program. Some of the clients come just for summer camp or just for respite. And this center has a lot of therapeutic spaces and recreational spaces included in it. And I'm very lucky because almost everything we do here is a lot of fun. So we're big into giving the kids that come through our doors a really meaningful childhood and supporting their families in whichever way possible. And often those are very creative and, different for every family that comes and depending on their needs. But that's, I guess, the gist of KCC. And in terms of my journey here, I can give you the shortened version, which is I grew up as a sibling of a brother who had complex medical needs. And because we were very close in age, we're 18 months apart, I guess it just became second nature. My family was very fortunate. We had a lot of community members and organizations that my parents were connected with that supported the journey from the start with, medical crisis. And even, we moved to Canada from abroad for medical intervention and, accommodations and support and family intervention. All of that was something that I experienced as a sibling. And I think, in hindsight, looking back at that time, I had this, peripheral view on what it means to have a family, to have a child with, ours was a medical challenge, but really just, the struggle to sort of maintain everything that a regular family needs to, but also balance the needs of a child who has either medical or other disabilities. And, in growing up with that kind of environment and knowing how many people, took care of us and helped us have a normal childhood experience, it was very natural for me to want to be involved and want to give back. And I think that curiosity and that comfort around children with disabilities or the medical world definitely jump-started me. I will say that I fell into the world of disabilities accidentally. I was doing a gap year in Israel after high school, and I was handed a community service job at a daycare for kids with autism. And I went to the person who was in charge and I said, I need to switch my placement because I've never heard of autism and I don't really do special needs. And she said, well, you're the only one in the program that's, fluent in Hebrew. So we really need you to keep this placement. Try it once or twice. If you really hate it or you feel uncomfortable, we'll switch it. And obviously I went and I loved it. And I went 2 days a week instead of 1 day a week because I couldn't get enough of it. And the rest is really history. I came back. I was, young and full of great ideas, and still thought, I can change the world, and opened up a summer camp, which grew from just 10 kids that came that first summer to what is now, a really large organization servicing hundreds of kids day in, day out throughout 12 months a year. But that's the shortened version.
Yeah, I mean, that's amazing. And so, I mean, you've been surrounded by this world since you were very young. So, and it's so interesting how, during that time, the way that you describe it, how it takes a village, and the way that you experience that village coming together in order to assist with this. So, thank you. So thank you so much for joining us today. For everyone who is just joining, feel free. We're gonna Yafi and I are gonna have a conversation for probably about 20 minutes here, just teasing out some ideas and some strategies about starting your journey when taking care of a child with complex needs. But please feel free to add your questions to the Q&A feature in Zoom on the Zoom toolbar as we go. And towards the end, after our conversation, we'll start taking questions and addressing any comments from any of our viewers here today. So getting back to the main conversation, you've seen this from so many perspectives, from your personal life to being on the front lines as student placement, to organizing your own camp, and now leading this school of therapy and addressing the needs of so many people with disabilities. I wonder if there's anything that you've been able to observe as you've gone through this growing experience, in terms of, what do you often see from young parents who are just starting this journey? Is there anything that you want to bring to the forefront or mention to anyone who's joining us today about, the good or maybe some of the mistakes that some people make early on in that journey?
Sure. And I'll just say, everybody's journey is unique, and everyone's circumstances are very unique. And I don't think there's like one, right way to do things. No one, starts the journey of parenthood thinking that they're going to go down this path. And so no matter how significant or complex or not the child's diagnosis is, or whatever medical issue is being dealt with, there's an element of, grief and adjusting that every parent needs to make, because you don't think about parenting in this way until you're thrust into it. So I don't think that there's any wrong way to do it, but I will say that after observing, hundreds of families go through the initial process of, being given a diagnosis or going through the crisis of a medical drama, there are, I would say, like a spectrum of responses and how people deal with it. And on one end, like there's two, I guess, major ones. There's on the one end, there's the families who, or the parent, it's usually the primary caregiver. So if that's the mom or the dad, that really, this defines them. Like they are just the ones that become the expert on taking care of their child. They know all the medications. They know more than their medical team, and they become like really almost the only ones that can care for this child. And it becomes their whole world and everything that defines them. And that makes sense. Like if you think about it, if anyone's child, had appendicitis or suddenly, injured themselves, like you put your whole life on hold, you have to go into like go mode, you rush to the hospital, you got to be up all night because your kid's in pain, recovering from surgery, whatever it is. And that's how human nature, parenthood kicks in. The trouble with that end of the spectrum is that for so many of our families who have kids with complex needs, that's not just appendicitis, and it's not just one surgery, and it's not just, a single seizure. It's over and over, and it's a whole list of issues. And it's not just medical, but it's also sometimes physical, neurological, emotional, behavioral, and sometimes, a mix of everything. And to live in a constant crisis mode where you drop everything and run because it's your kid is just no longer feasible. And so you're asking parents to go against, their regular instinct and think about ways to cope that really are very challenging because they're against what they would do naturally. But thinking about the big picture and thinking about sustainability, and can you really parent a child from a state of chaos and crisis for months or years on end? So that's one end, and we could talk a little bit more about maybe some suggestions. But on the other end, I also see families who have, a baby that's been given a diagnosis, and at the time of infancy, I don't know, everybody's baby's in a stroller, or the gap isn't so noticeable, and it's not so obvious that the child has needs and that the baby needs intervention. And through no fault, it's just sometimes easier to hope that maybe the diagnosis is wrong, and maybe, they'll grow out of that, or it will be different for them. And they do miss out on that opportunity to get their child early intervention. Sometimes it's a mixture of, feeling that there's a stigma in joining an intervention center or seeking help or bringing your child for therapy or for intervention. Mm-hmm. And sometimes it's just the difficulty in facing the reality that, your own baby, who, every mother thinks their baby's perfect, and they're just a baby. So it's easy to, or hard to face that reality and pushing that off. And that end of that reaction spectrum is also challenging, because there's only a short window for early intervention, and it's so valuable. So we want parents to take advantage of it.
Yeah, I can imagine, when there are fewer maybe physical developmental milestones, or less prominent ones in the early days, when the child is often in the stroller or in a seat or something like that, it's could be easy to continue and wait until those the larger milestones present themselves to start working on that. So it sounds like on the one side of things, you see a lot of parents who become very immersive very quickly in the child, and that's what you describe as dealing in crisis mode frequently, and sort of hovering in that mode. And then on the other side of the spectrum are the ones who try to normalize it. What would the middle look like? Like, what are some of the strategies that parents who are just starting with in the early days of their child's diagnosis, how do they get back to the center? And in your opinion, from what you've seen, is that the most successful place to operate from?
Certainly it's easier to have balance in everything that we do in life. But what we've been, successful in is really working with parents on acknowledging that, no, this isn't the road you planned on being on. And this isn't, the home life you thought you'd have. But, say if you're eligible for nursing care at home, we get that this is your kid and you feel like you should be the one waking up for them in the middle of the night. But there's a limit to how many sleepless nights a human can have and still, be the parent you want to be for your other kids, even, or for this child being so sleep deprived. And so giving over some of that care to whatever services that you're entitled for. There are often parents that need that encouragement or taking advantage of opportunities for respite. A lot of parents feel very guilty, like, it means they're they maybe don't love their child or don't want to spend Sundays with their kid. What do you mean? Like, it's my kid. I shouldn't need respite from my child. And being able to take a step back and being like, yes, I love my child, but I also need to survive this. And I need to have an identity outside of just being on, autopilot mode and like working on, getting through the day with my kid. You need to invest in your marriage and your other children and having your own life. And that's challenging for a lot of parents. And it often takes reminding that, yes, it's true that, most parents don't need, an extra set of hands or nursing care or a PSW at home, but also most, 3 and 4 year olds are playing more independently or can, entertain themselves or don't require ongoing night wakings, like they're sleeping through the night by age 1 or, so there's really pointing that out, I think is really hard for parents to see it when they're immersed in it. Easier said than done to be in the middle. But I think that taking a step back and looking at, is my entire life consumed by caring for this child? And do I get to enjoy my child? Like, so often I tell a parent, like, can you delegate some of the really difficult tasks? The ones where you get the most behavior from, or the ones that are most frustrating. Is there any room for delegating those so that you could actually enjoy your kid? And enjoying your kid is so important, because otherwise it's just an endless list of tasks. So
I mean, and I know for me, in everyday life, social circles and who you surround yourself with are often so important. Would you say that is a understatement for people who are raising a child with complex needs? Does that social circle become even that much more important, and trying to surround yourself in the right groups?
Oh, 100%. Like, if there's any advice I can give a parent who has a child with complex needs, it's go out there, join programs, network, get on a Facebook group, try and find other parents who are on a similar journey. And it doesn't have to be the same diagnosis, but those people that you meet along the way, they will potentially become your village. And those are the people that you don't need to explain, why there are dark rings around your eyes. You don't need to explain why you got emotional at a sibling's, preschool graduation. And they are the people that just get it, and they can be there for you in ways that your neighbors or your other friends just can't, not because they're terrible people, but because real empathy and real understanding of what a parent of a complex kid is going through. Even, though I speak to so many parents and I've been on the journey and supportive in hundreds of cases, it's still not the same. I still am not a parent of a child with complex needs. And I always urge parents to go out there and find reason to meet and to socialize with, and to even not for social reasons, you'll get the best information about how to navigate the system from a fellow parent. So oftentimes when I have a family who got a rare diagnosis for a young child, and I might know a family who has a slightly older child with that diagnosis, I'll pair those two families together, because there's so much that you could learn from a family who's navigated the part of the system that you're only just starting on.
And it's so important. But it's probably, I imagine it's probably important for the parents. I mean, those support groups and having other adults around who are going through the same thing, and help you to feel like that Sunday off is something that is understood, that's needed, and you don't feel that guilt from people in that social circle. But what about what those social circles do for the children in the formative years of development, and how that relates to their ability to grow and develop while living with their own complex needs? What have you seen in that regard?
Well, I think as a parent, you want your kid to, any parent, right? You look at your kid and you just hope that people love them, and that they're accepted, and that they not just have friends, but have people who enjoy their company and want to be around them. So I think from the get-go, just being able to surround yourself with people who get it and who know how to interact with your child and want to get to know your child is important for you as a parent, but also for your child to know that there's a space where they belong. I also want to add, if there are siblings in the family, I know that this is a source of a lot of anxiety for families, feeling like they haven't been able to give the sibling of the child with complex needs a good childhood experience, and feeling like, so much of their attention and focus is on the child with medical needs or with physical needs, and the siblings lose out. And there's a lot of, go to sleep at night feeling guilty for not being able to give every child what they need, but how much more so when so much of your attention and physical time is required for your child with complex needs. And I could speak from my experience, but I can also speak from just watching the community of the families that I work with. And I think that not enough is said about the gifts that come along with the journey. And I don't want to at all sugarcoat it. And I'm not one to, make everything sound rosy, but I do want to say like that there are really special opportunities and gifts that come along with raising a child with complex needs, specifically for siblings. And I think that there's a level of empathy and a level of understanding of the world that a sibling gets, especially if they're exposed to, organizations or medical places or clinics or spaces, if they're included in the care that goes into their sibling, they get a glimpse of this world of like empathy and care and just like have an understanding for humans out there that is very hard to educate on. You don't get that in a classroom, and you don't get that from, listening to your dad give a speech about how important it is to be inclusive. But I often tell parents, don't spend so much time feeling anxious about, what the siblings aren't getting, because there's also opportunities for them to grow from this. And it's really beautiful when you see it happen. And I'll tell you this, like the siblings of our kids that come to the center are often, the best summer camp volunteers and the best staff for other kids as well, because there's the level of connection that they learn that they can apply to literally like any kid.
Yeah. And I really appreciate you saying that. I can only imagine, it's easy to feel consumed by raising any child, let alone one with complex needs. And so, I can imagine the stress or perhaps the guilt that some parents feel dedicating so much time to one child when there's others in the family as well. And I think that perspective of the gifts that the sibling gains along that journey is a really important one. I do you have any thoughts about the need to balance attention between an able-bodied child versus one with complex needs?
It's such a tough question. Like I wish there was a magic formula. I'll just say like, I don't think there's as much resentment for a sibling growing up than maybe the parent perceives. I think that most siblings understand that the parent is just doing the best they can. And I think that, like I said, you develop a certain sensitivity that could be applied to so many other circumstances in your life. That being said, you go back to the first point that we were talking about, which is finding a way to balance. And sometimes balance means, going on that family vacation and booking your child with complex needs for respite, because, the siblings deserve to be able to go on a family vacation, even if right now that isn't in the cards for the child who has medical needs. Mm-hmm. And we do encourage families to do that because it's important and it's hard. It's a hard decision to make.
Yeah, well, I mean that's a really important thing for parents to understand as well, is that services like that are available to them, for continuing to try to achieve that balance. I'm gonna take it in a little bit of a different direction here. We at Avika, we love technology. Our platform was built around this idea. There's so much great technology out there, and people need an easy way to search through all their options and find what's appropriate for them. I'm really curious to hear from you, who has been immersed in this world for so many years now. How have things changed from a technology perspective of what was available to parents maybe 10 years ago versus now? And what, if anything, any ideas that you have for what they need to be considering about technology from the earliest days of their child's life?
So I think that's a question that has many different sides to it. From just a very simplistic standpoint, I mean, even like the constant new apps that are coming out that make our lives, anyone's lives, easier. I can only imagine how much simpler it makes the lives of parents who are dealing with complex needs at home, from something as simple as, being able to fill up a shopping cart on your phone, as opposed to trying to figure out how to balance pushing a shopping cart and a wheelchair at the same time. And maybe that's not something that people think about, but it's something that I think about, because I know the struggle of just doing your groceries, and having a child that's too big or not able to sit up in a shopping cart. So, how do you balance the two of those? Well, you can just use one of the shopping apps. So just from a time and accessibility, I think that it gives a lot of hope to families, knowing that this is where we are now. Imagine where we'll be in 5-10 years, and imagine what worlds will be open for my child. I joke with the educational staff here that we spend a lot of time with our kids in elementary, teaching them about money and taking them to stores and making sure that they're able to learn to buy things on their own and gain some independence. And I'm like, well, we should stop with that. We should teach them how to put their credit cards into like an Amazon order or a grocery shopping order, and be able to figure out what they need to make themselves a sandwich and just get it on an app, because that's the direction that the world is going into, and so much more accessible to them than, working on them going to a store independently right now. But both of them are important, but it's so nice to see that whatever is more accessible for us is it just makes the lives of kids with disabilities, it's that much more hopeful. And from a technology standpoint, I'm not a professional, speech and language pathologist, but it's blown my mind to see how far communication devices have come. And then even from a technology standpoint, in terms of letting children maneuver their own wheelchairs, and what sites you could use for that. It's come such a long way, and it's so promising. And I think for parents out there, just knowing that there's what to advocate for and to keep looking into, and to know that it's evolving so quickly, I would think that that's a message of hope for parents.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like hope. I know that we see the evolution in this technology all the time, and how it's cutting through so many barriers, whether it's mainstream technologies that have more powerful implications for people living with disabilities, or technologies that are designed specifically for them. I wonder as well, I mean, and I remember when you and I first started talking about this, there was this concept of a child's changing needs, and trying to keep up with them. You made some interesting points about how that wasn't necessarily the case in terms of how rapidly things change, but certainly kids grow and develop over time. Have you seen any, like, and technology can be expensive regardless of how often you need to change it. Have you seen any trends towards technologies that grow or change or are more flexible, so that they, one technology can grow with the children as they get older? Is that something that you've noticed, or am I just off on a ledge here?
It's just not my expertise. Certainly I've seen, kids being able to trial different devices and find the right one for them. And that doesn't mean it's going to be the right one forever. But I will take your point on a spin and say that what I have noticed is like a movement towards looking at the whole child, and where families were very focused, or, specialists were very focused on, the rehab and the therapy, and now looking at the whole child and really thinking about, what this child needs to succeed and to have, a joyful and purposeful and meaningful and full life, is not necessarily just about, their diagnosis or the things that they cannot do independently right now, but also looking at their social, emotional, and their behavior. And that's a really refreshing change in terms of dealing with not just the diagnosis, but really the whole child. So if you're asking about changing needs, I think, babies who come to us for our infant program, I think come for very specific needs. And then as they get a little older, and we're starting to look at them, at, their personality and their emotional and behavioral needs, those are important pieces that I think maybe in the past weren't looked at as significantly.
That's great. I think so. In terms of what you've observed is, and for parents who need to hear this message, make sure that they're working with the right teams who are helping and asking the right questions, to consider the child as a whole, as a person, as opposed to just certain physical disabilities that they might have. Does that sound right to you?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, great. I'm just gonna share a screen. So again, our sponsors for today are Control Bionics, and they are manufacturers of advanced speech technologies for both children and adults who have lost their voice or maybe never had one. So I'm just going to play a quick introductory video from Control Bionics here so everyone can get familiar with them. I do encourage you, if your child has a speech requirement for assistance with speech, to take a look at what Control Bionics has to offer. And of course, speak with your SLPs and your care team about what's available to them in general.
Meet the NeuroNode Trilogy, the latest assistive communication device from Control Bionics. The Trilogy is a Windows-based solution for those living with paralysis and loss of speech due to conditions like cerebral palsy, SMA, TBI, spinal cord injury, or ALS-MND. This device combines 3 access methods: touch control, eye control, and NeuroNode 3.0 control. Putting these access methods together allows for the fastest, most efficient communication speed while simultaneously reducing user fatigue. Not only does this solution provide a voice for the voiceless, but it also provides environmental control and native computer control. The 3-in-1 solution relieves the pressure of getting the right device for right now and provides a solution for the present and future. As a user's condition changes due to a progressive illness or daily fatigue, the NeuroNode Trilogy can adapt to that person's abilities using their preferred access method. The Trilogy is also backed by our industry-leading customer support. Contact us anytime, day or night, and our team will be there. There are many funding options available for the NeuroNode Trilogy, including funding support through Medicare, Medicaid, private insurance, the Veterans Administration, and various departments of education. Visit our website at www.controlbionics.com to learn more, or give us a call at 513-453-4848 to schedule an assessment with your local representative.
So thank you to Control Bionics. That video was obviously made for an American audience, but it's worth noting as well that the device is funded by the Assistive Device Program here in Ontario as well, and in other parts of Canada in their programs. If you are interested and you live outside of Canada or the US, it's worth reaching out to Control Bionics because they might be funded in your area as well. So thank you again to them. Without them, we couldn't put on any of these educational sessions. And thanks to everyone for joining us today. We appreciate your time, and Yafi, we appreciate your time so much. Thank you amidst all the wonderful things that you're doing for taking your time to speak with us today and speak with everyone who registered.
My pleasure.
Okay. If you do want to reach out to Yafi and ask questions afterwards, feel free to get in touch with us. So here, let me put up some contact information on the screen. So you can always head over to evika.io, and get in touch with us through our contact forms or through one of our suggestion forms. And of course, if you want to learn more about Control Bionics, feel free to visit their site directly, controlbionics.com, or search for them on Evika's database to learn more about the specifics of the technology. And with that, we'll sign off. So thank you again, Yafi, so much. And thanks everyone for joining us tonight.